One night, Caleb Ryland uncovered a secret buried so deep it could destroy everything, and someone will do anything to keep it hidden. Caleb Ryland had always believed that family was supposed to be the one bond that could not be broken by time or distance. He believed it when his father walked out for good and his mother began to fade under the weight of keeping the house together. He believed it when his younger sister Chloe showed up on his doorstep in the middle of the night at 18 with tear-stained cheeks and 2 worn duffel bags. He took her in without hesitation, promising himself she would never feel the abandonment that had scarred him. Years passed, and Caleb did more than just give her shelter. He worked long days and extra hours at the auto shop to cover her college tuition when she decided to study interior design. He drove her to interviews, helped her polish her portfolio, and bought her a used car when she could not afford one. When Chloe moved back into the family home after college, it was under the promise that it would be temporary. Caleb agreed without hesitation, even continuing to pay part of the mortgage so she would not drown in student loans. It was a sacrifice that cost him his own plans for a down payment on a place of his own, but he convinced himself it was worth it. Over time, the gratitude in her voice began to fade. Requests for help became expectations, and if he ever refused, she accused him of being selfish. If he asked when she might repay him, she would claim he was greedy. The bond that had once felt unbreakable began to weaken, but Caleb pushed the unease aside, telling himself she was simply under stress. The first cracks appeared quietly. His name was removed from the family group messages about the house. Meetings happened without his knowledge. When he asked why, Chloe dismissed it, saying she assumed he was too busy. Then one Sunday afternoon, he arrived at the house to find his key no longer fit the lock. She claimed it was a security measure because of a recent break-in nearby. Caleb wanted to believe her and accepted the excuse even as something in his chest tightened. Everything came to a head on a Saturday evening at their mother's house. The air was filled with the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken. 20 family members packed into the living room. Caleb stood near the mantel, speaking to a cousin, when Chloe entered with a small cardboard box in her hands. Her voice was cold, stripped of any warmth. In front of everyone, she announced that he should collect his belongings from the house. She stepped forward and handed him the box as if his entire existence could fit into 12 inches by 6. Caleb stayed still, every gaze in the room fixed on him. He did not speak, did not move. The humiliation was deliberate. Her chosen stage meant to strip him of dignity. He turned and left without touching the box, his silence a wall she could not break through. 2 days later, an email arrived in his inbox from a law office representing Chloe. The subject line read urgent, and the message was short. "We need to talk, call immediately." Caleb knew in that moment that she had overplayed her hand. Before the fracture, there had been years when Chloe had been his closest confidant. She had hugged him tightly the day he gave her the car keys to her first vehicle. She had cried with relief when he covered her tuition during a semester she thought she would have to drop out. But the email was not about old belongings. It was about the house. She had refinanced the property without his consent, claiming he was no longer a partial owner. To convince the bank, she had painted him as someone who had abandoned the home entirely. What she did not disclose was that for a decade Caleb had paid a portion of the mortgage, each payment documented and traceable. Caleb did not reply to the email. He did not call. He began a plan. He went through every bank transfer, every receipt, every text message in which Chloe thanked him for covering her share. He found old emails where she acknowledged his stake in the house. Then he called a real estate attorney he trusted, a man named David Maddox, who owed him a favor from a past deal. Maddox listened carefully, then laid out the steps Caleb would need to take. Step 1, remain silent. Step 2, file a legal claim for his share of the property, for back payments, and for damages due to wrongful exclusion. Step 3, contact the mortgage lender directly with proof of his financial involvement to freeze further transactions. Caleb did exactly that. The lender halted any refinancing or sale. He then sent an anonymous tip to the local zoning board about an unpermitted renovation Chloe had boasted about on social media, a large deck added 2 years earlier. Within a week, an inspection notice was issued. An anonymous package containing the details of the lawsuit also reached her employer's HR department, where her role depended heavily on maintaining a clean financial record. The call came one evening. Chloe's voice was shaking, not with remorse, but with fury. "You went behind my back," she accused. Caleb almost laughed at the hypocrisy. "Like you did when you erased me from the deed," he replied. She tried to guilt him, warning that he was ruining the family. His voice was calm as he told her she had already done that. He was simply making it official. While the legal battle simmered, another part of Caleb's life quietly intertwined with the conflict. For 6 months, he had been seeing Elena Markham, a marketing consultant who had entered his life in the most unexpected way when her car broke down outside the shop where he worked. They had clicked instantly. She was warm, intelligent, and carried an optimism that softened the edges of his guarded nature. Caleb had kept their relationship mostly private, not wanting to expose her to the toxic undercurrent of his family troubles. But as the lawsuit progressed, hiding it became harder. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the long silences, the late nights spent poring over documents. When she pressed for answers, he deflected. That changed the night she arrived at his apartment with takeout in hand and determination in her eyes. "You're shutting me out, Caleb," she said. "If we're serious, I need to know what is happening." He told her everything. The years of support, the betrayal, the lawsuit. She listened, her expression shifting from empathy to steel. She told him not to let Chloe get away with it. Then she admitted something that made Caleb's chest tighten. She had once worked briefly on a marketing campaign for Chloe's design business. It had only been a short project, but enough for her to see how manipulative Chloe could be. The revelation only deepened Caleb's resolve, though it also stirred unease. He wondered whether Chloe already suspected their connection and whether she might try to use it as leverage. The first court hearing brought no resolution, but it exposed the strength of Caleb's case. Chloe arrived with a polished lawyer and an air of confidence that faltered when Maddox laid out the evidence. The bank statements, the dated emails, the documented acknowledgments. The shift in her posture was slight, but unmistakable. Her eyes flicked toward Elena in the gallery, and Caleb felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. As they left the courthouse, Elena slipped her hand into his and told him she was there for whatever came next. Caleb believed her. But as they walked together down the courthouse steps, he could not shake the feeling that Chloe was not finished. She had lost the first round, and he knew that when cornered, she was capable of moves that could wound far deeper than money. The days after the hearing felt like the calm before a storm. Caleb went about his work at the auto shop, fixing transmissions and replacing worn brake pads, but the steady hum of routine could not mask the weight pressing against his mind. Every quiet moment became a breeding ground for unease. Chloe's silence was uncharacteristic. In the past, she would have called daily to spit venom or to try to negotiate from a place of false confidence. Now she was saying nothing, and that silence was more unnerving than her rage. Elena noticed the shift in him. She would sit across from him at dinner and catch his eyes wandering to the window, as though expecting a shadow to move past. One night, she leaned forward, resting her hand over his. "Caleb," she said softly, "I know you think she's planning something. You are right. But whatever it is, we will handle it together." Her presence steadied him, yet he could not shake the memory of Chloe glancing at Elena during the hearing. It felt like the moment a predator marks its prey. The first strike came not in the form of a call or a letter, but through whispers. Customers at the shop started making offhand comments that made Caleb's stomach turn. One mentioned hearing that he had stolen money from his own family. Another hinted that he had used his sister's credit without permission. The rumors were ugly, and their origin was obvious. Chloe had found a way to taint his reputation without leaving her fingerprints. Caleb confronted it head-on. He spoke to long-term customers and explained the truth. Most believed him, but the damage was not entirely contained. Word spreads fast in small communities, and doubt lingers even when facts are clear. Then the second strike landed harder. Elena received a message from a mutual acquaintance of hers and Chloe's. It was a screenshot of an email Chloe had sent, painting Elena as someone who had helped Caleb falsify documents for the lawsuit. It was baseless, but the implications were serious. If it reached the wrong ears, it could cast suspicion on the evidence they had built so carefully. Elena's hands shook when she showed Caleb the message. "I swear I never even touched anything related to your case except listening to you talk about it," she said, her voice tight. Caleb believed her without hesitation, but anger surged through him like a lit fuse. This was no longer just about property or money. Chloe was attacking the one person who had stood by him without question. Maddox reacted with measured calculation when Caleb brought in the email. "We will not take the bait," he said. "She wants us to lash out so she can twist it in court. Instead, we gather. Every lie she tells becomes another thread in the rope she is hanging herself with." Caleb followed the advice, but his patience was wearing thin. He began pulling together not just the financial records, but testimonies from neighbors who had seen him in the house regularly, contractors who had worked on repairs at his expense, even old text threads with their mother, where she acknowledged his role as co-owner. The tension between him and Chloe reached a new level when they crossed paths unexpectedly at the grocery store. She was dressed in a designer coat, her hair styled perfectly, but her eyes were sharp as glass. "You should have taken the money I offered before all this got ugly," she said under her breath as they stood in the frozen foods aisle. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You never offer me anything, and you know it." She smiled faintly. "You still think this is about what is fair. It's not. It's about who can walk away standing." That night, Caleb could not sleep. Elena lay beside him, her breathing soft and steady, but his mind was racing. Chloe's words were not idle. She was warning him that the fight was about to turn brutal. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Chloe's lawyer claiming that Caleb had harassed her employer and caused financial harm to her business. It was a countersuit designed to bleed him of time and money. Maddox was ready for it, filing a swift motion to dismiss with evidence showing that any contact with her employer had been through legitimate legal channels. But the move forced Caleb to attend additional hearings, each one draining his energy and pulling him away from work. Through it all, Elena became both his anchor and his vulnerability. They grew closer in the fire of the conflict, sharing long nights of whispered fears and stolen moments of relief. But he also knew that Chloe's awareness of their relationship meant Elena was a target. One evening, as they locked up the shop together, Caleb noticed a car idling across the street with its lights off. It pulled away slowly when he turned to look. The next morning, Elena found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. It contained no signature, just a sentence that made her blood run cold. "You have no idea who you are standing next to." She brought it to Caleb without hesitation. His hands clenched around the paper, rage burning hotter than he had felt at any point in the fight. Maddox urged caution, but Caleb began taking his own precautions. He installed cameras outside, both his apartment and the shop. He altered his routines, watching for the car, the shadow, the sign that Chloe's campaign was moving into dangerous territory. The legal battle pressed on. More evidence came to light in Caleb's favor. Proof that Chloe had lied to the bank, concealed payments, and falsified dates. The judge's tone toward her grew colder with each hearing. But Caleb knew that victories in court did not erase the war outside of it. One night, as he and Elena returned from dinner, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It contained a single image, a photograph of Elena walking alone to her car 2 days earlier. The message read, "Accidents happen." Caleb felt the air leave his lungs. This was no longer about property or money. This was about control, intimidation, and breaking him where it hurt most. He looked at Elena, who had gone pale, and he realized the fight had entered a stage where the rules no longer applied. He forwarded the message to Maddox, but the lawyer's reply was unsettling. "We can present this to the court, but without proof of who sent it, it will be dismissed as unrelated." Caleb understood, then, that Chloe's real weapon was not just legal maneuvering, but fear. She wanted him to believe she could touch any part of his life at will. As the next court date approached, Caleb prepared himself for both the legal and personal battle ahead. Elena insisted on standing by him, even as he suggested she distance herself for her own safety. She refused, her eyes fierce. "I'm not letting her win by scaring me off." The morning of the hearing, Caleb walked into the courthouse with Elena at his side and Maddox carrying another stack of damning evidence. He felt the weight of every step, the knowledge that one wrong move could shatter everything he had fought for. Chloe was already seated at the plaintiff's table, her expression calm, but her eyes holding that same cold calculation he had seen in the grocery store. She glanced briefly at Elena, then back to Caleb, and for the first time in months, she smiled. It was not a smile of defeat. It was the kind of smile that told him she still had something hidden, something she was waiting to unleash. The judge called the room to order, and Caleb felt the air tighten. Whatever was coming, it was about to surface. And in that moment, as silence fell over the courtroom, Caleb realized that the real endgame had only just begun. Caleb Ryland stood outside the Frost Tower, the city lights reflecting off the glass like a wall of steel. Inside, Victoria Frost was hosting her quarterly shareholders meeting, confident she had crushed him. His website was shut down, his contracts terminated, and the industry was whispering about his so-called meltdown. But she didn't know that Caleb still held the one thing she couldn't bury, a folder containing documents from his late mentor, Harold Dane. Documents that proved Victoria had forged numbers, siphoned funds through offshore accounts, and manipulated stock prices for her personal gain. He walked into the lobby with a calm he didn't entirely feel. Every step echoed like a countdown. The security guard's eyes narrowed. "Here, for the meeting? Tell Ms. Frost," Caleb said evenly, that her past just walked in. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with perfume, expensive cologne, and the smug satisfaction of a queen guarding her throne. Victoria's lips curled in a mock smile as she spotted him. Well, the fallen prince. I thought you'd be licking your wounds somewhere in the suburbs by now." Caleb didn't sit. He placed the folder on the table and slid it toward the nearest board member. "That's the truth about your CEO. You've all been looking at fake quarterly reports. Here's the real math." Victoria's smirk faltered. "Get out before you what?" Caleb interrupted, his voice steel. "So me? You'll have to explain to the Securities Commission first. And the press. I've got every email, every transaction. My lawyer's waiting for my signal." The board members flipped through the pages, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock to fury. Whispers rose, phones buzzed, and Victoria's carefully curated poise began to fracture. "This is fabricated," she started, but her CFO cut in. "I've seen these numbers before. Years ago. They were buried. It was over." 2 hours later, Caleb stood outside again, watching as Victoria was escorted out under a storm of flashing cameras. Her empire had crumbled in less time than it took to drink a cup of coffee. He didn't feel the rush of triumph he'd imagined. Instead, there was a quiet, steady satisfaction. Not because he'd won, but because Harold Dane's legacy was safe. A reporter shoved a microphone toward him. "Mr. Ryland, any comment?" He thought for a moment. "Power isn't about who sits at the head of the table," he said. "It's about who can still look in a mirror at the end of the day." As he walked away, the city lights seemed a little less cold. Caleb had lost his company, his contracts, and months of his life. But he had something Victoria never could buy back, his integrity. And that, in the end, was worth more than any crown.